Can the mere possibility of something prove it's definitely real? Some philosophers say yes, and use that to prove God exists. Now that might sound ridiculous, but the logic behind it is taken seriously. Still, there's one response that could tear the whole thing apart. Modal ontological arguments start with a simple idea. If God's existence is possible, and God is a necessary being, then God must exist. Wait, what? That's it? Let's break down how that's supposed to work and why it's so controversial. God is defined as a maximally great being. He exists necessarily, is omnipotent, omniscient, and morally perfect. It is possible that such a being exists, therefore God exists necessarily. This argument uses modal logic, a system that uses axioms and symbols to talk about necessity and possibility. That might sound a bit confusing, but we'll break it down step by step. Let's go. The argument begins with possible existence, but what does it even mean for something to be possible? The best way to think about possible existence is in terms of possible worlds. When we say something like a unicorn has possible existence, this is just the equivalent to saying there is a possible world in which the unicorn exists. It might not exist in our world, but it might in some hypothetical world like the Elder Scrolls Oblivion or Harry Potter. It might sound stronger to say there is a world where unicorns exist compared with unicorns might exist, but in modal logic those two are exactly the same. To see how this is true, we must grab the whiteboard. Right, these circles are possible worlds. Think of something that is impossible, and when we say impossible, we mean there is some logical contradiction in the concept of the thing, like a four-sided triangle. If four-sided triangles are impossible, there is no possible world in which they could exist. But to say that something's existence is possible just means that there is at least one logically possible world where it exists. There is no world with four-sided triangles, but here are our unicorns. Unicorns have to be in at least one possible world because if they weren't, we'd be saying their existence is impossible, like the four-sided triangle. But we've concluded they are possible because nothing about having a horn on your forehead is logically contradictory. So you see, possible existence is just the same thing as existing in at least one possible world. Easy. Now this is where it gets really interesting because unicorns, whether they exist or not, would, like horses, be contingent beings. Everything around you, including you, is a contingent being. They have a beginning, an end. They didn't have to exist, and one day they will exist, no longer. God, on the other hand, we've defined as a maximally great being with necessary existence. A necessary being has always existed. It can't not exist. And I know what you're thinking, here comes the cheaty-peaty part where we just define God into existence. But there are very plausible arguments which show that God must be a necessary being if he exists. I've covered it in a brilliant video, check it out. Anyway, let's stay focused, this is the complicated bit. If it's possible that God exists necessarily, then he does exist necessarily. What is this wizardry? Here's our circles again. If God's existence is possible, he exists in at least one possible world. But God is not a unicorn. Remember, he is a necessary being, so if he exists at all, he cannot not exist. By definition then, if he necessarily exists in one possible world, he exists in all possible worlds, or else he would be existing here, but not here, and that would be contrary to the concept of a necessary being. Therefore, if God possibly exists, he exists everywhere. This looks tricky, but this is just a formal system of logic known as Axiom S5. No wordplay going on here. S5 just tells us that if something possibly exists necessarily, then it exists necessarily. So to restate, if God is a necessary being and he exists in even one possible world, then he must exist in all of them, including ours. But what if there's something wrong with S5 modal logic? It seems to make sense, but there is a clever rebuttal that throws modal ontological arguments into doubt. Using S5 as our modal logic, we can represent modal ontological arguments succinctly as possibly God exists, necessarily. If God exists, then it is necessary that God exists. Therefore, it is necessary that God exists. However, if God possibly exists, then it's also true that God possibly doesn't exist. Wouldn't you agree? What if we flip the first premise and start with possibly God doesn't exist? Follow the exact same logic, we've just gone and proved God can't exist. How? Because if something only possibly exists, that means there are possible worlds where it doesn't exist. As a necessary being, if God exists anywhere, he exists everywhere. But he can't exist in all worlds because that would contradict the premise that he possibly doesn't exist. Therefore, he can't exist in any possible world at all. All we're doing is using the same logic, but now we've proved that he must necessarily not exist. This is called the symmetry problem. As philosopher Graham Oppy puts it, unless you already believe in God, there's no reason to prefer one starting point over the other. Both arguments start from plausible claims that are epistemically on par. However, they lead to conclusions inconsistent with each other. Proponents of the modal ontological argument require a compelling argument to break the symmetry and give us a reason to prefer their starting point to its reversal. So what do you think? Do modal ontological arguments fail? If you want more, check out my series on ontological arguments. People seem to like the one on Descartes in there, so maybe check that one out. For now, thank you for watching. See you next time.